Okay, everybody. I want to welcome everybody to this bi-weekly webcast. Now, I have to apologize. We did miss last week because we had flu within the organization. But if there's one thing that's true about getting the flu is once you kick it, you hit the ground running again. And so we are ready to go. And so it just makes perfect sense that we're going to talk about work ethic tonight. And especially considering we lost to Michigan State last week. I'm talking about the Michigan Wolverines. So now we got to get back to work, and maybe Coach Harbaugh should be watching this webinar so we can get some things going over there. So anyway, everybody, this is a presentation that is sponsored by That's a D1. It's a Grind for Your Stars organization. And I can promise you this is Shemy Schembechler on this end. We're very proud to partner with this great organization based out of San Diego under the leadership of Christy and Sam Ferguson, who themselves are proud parents of up-and-coming athletes that aspire to play college athletics. And so that's kind of the business model that we are aspiring to promote. And the bottom line is it's about being a parent and raising your kid in athletics, and how athletics can be a very positive role in everybody's life, and how work ethic and all these things that we talk about on a weekly basis are key components of what this organization is all about. And one of the reasons I like it a lot is because they've got some really cool clothing coming down the pike here. And so we'll have that to announce here very soon. I know Christy has put some posts out there kind of giving a great sense of anticipation for what we have coming down the pike. And so we have a lot of exciting things in this particular partnership between GES and that's a D1.com. So anyway, Christy, let's go to that first slide. We want to talk about the passion to improve. And we are we have some very, and as you can imagine, in my life with athletics, growing up with a Hall of Fame football coach, we have some particular opinions about how the whole attitude, and we talked about attitude in the very first presentation. We have to figure out how to derive attitude and put it into action, okay? It's an easy thing to motivate your mind and to get out there and do something, but it's going to be apparent for each and every student athlete who competes in athletics. You have to derive that attitude that's going to sustain effort and work ethic so you can achieve whatever goals that you want to achieve, okay? So we're going to talk about deriving attitude into action, all right? There are a lot of things that individuals can do as athletes that are going to lay the founding for whatever you aspire to do, whether it's in the classroom or athletics. And one of the things that my father always talked about a lot is we're going to make all of our student athletes accountable for what they do, not only on the field and in the court and in the athletic arena, but more importantly in the classroom. And I think if you demand that upon your kids and make them responsible for both aspects of their lives, they can actually work off of each other exceptionally well, okay? Now, how do we go about doing that? We want to prioritize what is important. All of our young people, they all have unique skill sets. They have things that they're very good at, things that they're not as good at. I can promise you, being a young kid, I always wanted to figure out how in the world am I going to get down to practice on time. And this is where my mom and dad played a key role in saying, we want to prioritize your academic endeavors and to motivate me to get my schoolwork done early so that I can afford the opportunity to go to practice. And so we prioritize everything in our household so that you understood what has to happen before you get to do what you want to do, okay? So say, for example, we've got a young person that doesn't want to do homework and doesn't want to do any of the things that they have to do, that's going to prevent them from doing the things they want to do. So there was always a priority list at our household, and I can tell you, and this is certainly the case in everything that my father did as a part of running his program. He made sure all of his players made it to class every single day. And if you didn't make it to class, there were going to be penalties that would prevent you from practicing, playing in a game, or what have you. One of my favorite stories was that there was a great defensive lineman who actually currently is playing in the National Football League, and his name is Mike Turvac. I can't remember if I touched on that earlier, but it's such an important story that really lays the groundwork for what is really important. And so here's Mike Turvac. At the time, he's telling me the story about getting recruited to go play at the University of Michigan, and my father is in his home in Youngstown, Ohio, to talk about going to class, making standard progress towards a degree, and we're there with the parents and all that, and we're going to come out. They came out of that story, and Turvac ended up committing, signing his letter of intent to go to Michigan, and comes to Michigan, and he was a defensive lineman. And usually defensive linemen, pretty much all of them got redshirted back during that period of time. But Mike was good enough to actually make it to the two deep and get a chance to play, and he was playing pretty good football. And it was interesting that once he got his feet wet and started gaining a lot of confidence about what he was doing, he started to think he can slack in other areas. And one of those areas was actually risking the old coach's wrath by cutting class, thinking he probably wasn't going to get caught. Well, inevitably, Bo found out, and he found, once he found out, he brings Turvac into his office and literally rips him a brand new one. And he reminds him of that meeting at his home about he promised his parents that he was going to go to class every day. And Turvac had the gall to say, "Bo, you were serious about that?" Well, that basically, it was funny, but at the same time, Turvac got a full month of Dawn Patrol, doing 93 steps of Michigan Stadium steps to learn his lesson. And I think the moral of the story there is Turvac, here's a guy that's well into his 50s. He's a defensive line coach and achieved some unbelievable success. He's currently coaching the Green Bay Packers. And he talks about how that lesson alone paved the way for him to have the success that he did as a coach, not only because he played in the NFL for a few years, but it made him understand of what really was important. What is your priority in life? And by having that understanding, and I think if you put your foot down early with your kids and you make the priorities about academics first at every turn, and it allows them to have a seriousness and appreciation for what their academic careers mean, much more than what they're going to do athletically, okay? So let's make sure that's key in how we're raising all of our kids, all right? Now, so we're going to go into that and talk about how do we go about attacking our deficiencies. And we can delve more into the athletic and sports and football and basketball. You know, there's no such thing as a perfect player anywhere, all right? Everybody has something to work on. And I think if you understand your deficiencies and you make that a priority about how you go about preparing for your next practice or your next game, that is going to be a key component for what is going to make you a more complete player in whatever sport you decide to play. So I want everybody to take on the attitude of our dear friend Rosie the Riveter over here. We can do it, but it's understanding that you have to attack your deficiencies first, get those ironed out. And I think over the long run, our young people are going to appreciate the fact that they were able to attack a goal, attack something that they weren't very good at. I tell you, in regards to everything that we do at GES Advisory Company, is we identify everything that all of our players need to do on a regular basis, whether it's going and taking yoga, maybe watching a little bit more film, maybe playing another sport that's going to address some of the deficiencies that they have. There's always going to be something, and I think the best players and the best students know what their deficiencies are, because if they can address those deficiencies, it's going to make them better over the long haul, okay? So that's key, all right? Now, here's the other thing. And my dad, as you can imagine, kept a pretty tight schedule. And I'm going to give you a couple of examples that were really important. I can tell you they've done a lot for me personally, is how you hold yourself to a tight schedule. I remember growing up in Ann Arbor, Michigan, of how great it was that my dad had devised a schedule and a strategy to get from the house to the office in 7 different ways that would allow him to get to the office in 5 minutes. And so he was competitive about that, because he was so strict about his schedule that he wanted to be early for everything. And he basically held all of his players, all of his coaching staff accountable to keeping a tight schedule. If anybody ever played for Bo, they all knew the importance of being 15 minutes early to everything. All right. If you're 15 minutes early to everything, you can actually focus on some things, clear your mind, and be able to work on some things individually. So when it comes time to have the meeting, you are completely locked in. You're on the same page with your coaching staff and your teammates. And I just think it's so critically important to keep a tight schedule. And the same goes for practice too. I mean, some of the best coaches I've ever been around they understand how to keep a very tight schedule. My father did the same thing as a part of his football practice schedule, that they would script every single minute, every single second, every single period, whether it was the individual period or full team or what have you. And it was always interesting to me that whenever they put a schedule out, they wouldn't necessarily tie it into an individual time, but they would tie it into the responsibility of every practice. And he would always say to his coaches and his players every single time, this particular practice schedule allows us to be here for 2 hours, but only if you do the practice correctly and you focus on your responsibilities to make sure that we do every play right, every section right, everything has to be right, and we will get out of here on time. What a great motivational tool it is for your players to say, we're going to focus on the job at hand, do a great job with what we're doing, and it will allow us to get the job done, get out of practice on time so we can get to training table and get to study table and do all the things. But it allows you to put that mental focus on what you're doing so that you are successful, not only getting ready for a game or getting ready for class. And I think my dad always demanded that his players get to class early on time as well. And I think that's really important. Okay, Christy, let's go on to the next slide. So the next slide is having a championship work ethic. Okay, so we talk about having what the mind can conceive and believe. And I know people get tired of me talking about this all the time, but I think it's critically important. Understanding what the mind can conceive and believe, the body will achieve, and the mind will achieve. And it goes back to goal setting a little bit. And we talked about that a little bit in our previous webinar, is that if you believe you can be a great student, a great athlete, a great basketball player, a great wrestler, it doesn't make any difference, is if you can conceive that and you chart your course and you have that mindset that you want to improve, you're going to reach those goals. And I think the vast majority of people that are successful in this world, particularly here in the United States, because we do have a free country, is many times if you have the mindset that you want to be successful and you want to get to a certain level as a career, I keep thinking about the head coach at Maryland, the head coach at Minnesota, Oh my goodness, his name's always elude me. But anyway, we know who we're talking about. These guys all had the mindset that they wanted to be a head football coach long before they ever get there. And they chart what they do each and every day so they can reach that goal. And maybe some of these goals are 2 and 3 and 4 year plans. In some cases, they're 10-year plans. PJ Fleck, I keep thinking about PJ Fleck. PJ Fleck sat down and said, I want to be a head football coach. And he was still playing in college when he decided that's what he wanted to do in life. And I think if you have that mindset, that goal-setting mindset, that this is what you want to do, and you do everything that you have to do to be able to achieve that goal, you will achieve that goal, okay? Next thing, and I know it sounds very basic, and it is, but I think it's very, very important. I think we live in a world of social media where kids are on Instagram and they're spending too much time on the computer and the iPads and things like that. We want to make sure that we are prioritize getting enough sleep. And back in my scouting days in the NFL when I was with the Redskins, I went to the University of Iowa, and there's a great strength coach out there by the name of Chris Doyle. And they literally have a sign on the front of the weight room of Coach Doyle's office, get 8 hours of sleep every night. And I think for young people, particularly in high school, it's so important to have those patterns, to get a good night's rest every night, because it allows you to have that mental focus each and every day. All right. I remember in college, and I was never the smartest guy in the whole world going to college, where you felt like you could actually wait to study for an exam and cram and do all that stuff. And odds are you ended up not doing as well in that exam because you had the whole cramming philosophy. If you do the work far in advance and you prioritize how you prepare for that test or that game, getting that 8 hours of sleep is going to allow you to maintain that mental focus that we keep talking about. All right. Here's the other thing. Number 3, challenge yourself. All right. You always want to get out of your comfort zone. You want to do things that you normally wouldn't demand of yourself, and maybe going out and doing a little extra work. I mean, when I challenge my kids to go out and do something, whether it's improving their flexibility or their work ethic, or if you have to hit the weight room maybe an extra day this week, get out of your comfort zone and develop a mindset that you always want to challenge yourself more so than what you normally are willing to do. All right. Look at all the successful people out there. I mean, we can utilize my father, myself, my beautiful wife, Megan, with her cookie company. These people go out and in some cases they'll bend themselves over backwards to make sure that their organization and their business is a success. The same holds true for every single student athlete that wants to get to a certain level. If you want to be a Division I football player, or Division I wrestler, or Division I gymnastic athlete, you always want to have the mindset that you want to challenge yourself every single day. All right. Now, last but certainly not least, and I think that this gets lost amongst young people a lot, is you always want to take care of your body and find ways to develop your athleticism. Okay. We talk about yoga. We talk about conditioning. We talk about maybe doing some type of mental training, mental toughness training, maybe going to see a personal psychiatrist. Not that anybody has a problem, but go out and seek people that are going to develop different parts of your mind and your body and your athleticism. Out of all the kids that I'm fortunate enough to work with and grade, there's always some things that you can do to develop yourself athletically, whether it's doing box jumps or change of direction drills or doing some flexibility drills. Take care of your body. If there's one thing, if you look at all the guys that I was fortunate enough to work with in the National Football League, these guys spend, especially the guys that have long careers, they spend an inordinate amount of time in taking care of their bodies, not only getting enough sleep, but doing different things in the off season that's going to lend themselves to be able to attack that season and sustain a career. And I think for those of us that are trained in athletics and been involved in athletics for a long period of time, this isn't just about being a professional athlete or a college athlete. You want to develop some routines in taking care of your body so that by the time you're old enough, 30, 40, 50, in some cases 60 years old, obviously your goals change, but you want to be able to say, hey, in 40 years, I want to be able to keep up with my grandchildren, and I want to be able to do this and that. And if you have that energy and that enthusiasm, and you do things that are going to take care of your body and go seek out the types of people that are going to help you with that, you're going to be in for a great life. Now, obviously, tomorrow is never promised for a lot of us, but I think if you have that mindset, you're going to give yourself the best chance to be able to achieve those types of goals. Okay? Now, here I see we do have some really good comments over here. Developing athletically is important. Good job, Keith Miller. You say developing mentally is as important. Is as important. A smart 4-7 guy will get to the ball. Oh, you're absolutely right, Keith. I can list you a boatload of players that played in the NFL that couldn't run a lick, but because they were instinctive and smart, they were able to play a lot longer than people thought. That's an excellent point. All right. I think as we look back on especially for us as parents, talking about how we go about training our kids, and obviously we want to derive passion and enthusiasm for what they do as they find what their true passion is all about. I think that really is important. I think work ethic is something that gets proven through passion, and it basically substantiates the passion that you have. When you have a work ethic, it just goes to show that you love what you do. And if you have that, I think that's critically important. You know, Christy, you talk about 90% mental. You know, and that's a very important aspect. Is and I believe this for years, is that life is 10% what happens to you, 90% how you react to it. And I think that's probably one of the most important lessons anybody can teach you about how to get things going and do things the right way and having the right attitude so that you can have a good and strong work ethic. I can tell you, and you know, there's another thing about this. You know, college football has changed an awful lot through the years. And back in the day, back when my dad was coaching in the 70s and 80s, we used to have 30 straight practices in the spring. Now, they've cut in half since that time. But my dad would schedule practices, scrimmages every single day for 30 straight days. And it was challenging and it was tough. And one of the greatest accomplishments, and obviously it's a little thing, but I think a lot of these guys that played for Bo back then, is if you were able to make it through 30 straight days of practices and scrimmages, they actually gave you a T-shirt. And it said right on the T-shirt, this is, I practiced 30 days for Michigan. And it's amazing how much pride that those kids had and those players had just by the opportunity of getting the T-shirt. And those T-shirts were hard to get. Like if you got hurt, you didn't make it, prepared mentally and physically to be able to get that T-shirt. I know there are guys that played for my dad that are walking around, they're 50, 60 years old today, and they still wear that T-shirt everywhere. And what a great lesson that is for our young people to be able to challenge themselves to wear a T-shirt. And it's more of the mindset than anything else. But having a T-shirt like that really served them well. Maybe, Christy, that might be an idea for a T-shirt we want to make. All right? Sound like a good idea? Let's see. Keith, here we go. How do you feel about parents having personal trainers for 6-year-old kids with facilities? Keith, I think we're jumping the gun. I think as parents, we should be able to take up that responsibility ourselves. I think if we do what we should in developing our own athleticism and work ethic and things like that, I think that's going to be more important for our kids than having a personal trainer do it, because regardless of what people say, parents have the biggest impact on their kids' lives. I don't care who you talk to about that. You set the standard for your kids. If your kid's going to be successful, it's probably all the work that you do. And I can tell you, even through the recruiting process, I speak this ad nauseum all the time, is I make these kids understand that a lot of their success that they have achieved is attributed to all the efforts that their parents made, getting them to practice, getting him to do sit-ups. As a matter of fact, I got to get my son Bo caught up on doing his push-ups. But things like that where you can challenge your kids, and there's things you can do on your own that you don't have to go out and get a personal trainer. Does that make sense, Keith? Does that help you? All right, good. All right, let's see. Any other questions? Oh, Shallon wants the PowerPoint. Oh, I will definitely take care of that, Shallon. You can count on me for that. As soon as we get off this call, I'll email it to you. All right? I love it. Pain is temporary. Championships last forever. Hey, Keith, championships is an attitude, not necessarily a trophy. All right? I mean, people talk about my dad winning 13 Big Ten championships in 21 years. The players don't, I mean, they talk about it, but it's more important to them of what it meant to live through that championship, to earn that championship, and how they talk with pride about that. All right? Let's see. Championship work ethic. I mean, Keith, you're impressive, buddy. This is awesome. Discipline, accountable, the team. Really good stuff here, guys. Pre-practice. Being on time is late. Very good. I love it. Okay. Any more questions, anybody? This is what we're here. All right? We got to get our kids inspired so they can achieve whatever their dreams aspire them to do. All right? So in the meantime, obviously you see two good-looking people, one ugly one on these pictures. So you got Christy and Sam and an ugly Shem over there. Be sure to go check out the social media platforms where we are: Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, www.that'sad1.com. And then you can check out our program because we're tied into each other. You go to gesadvisory.com, and you'll be able to read up on all the cool things that we're doing to really foster the development of all our young kids. And so we want to thank everybody for coming online here with us. And I can tell you, this might have been the most exciting webinar we've had. How about the ethics of the player? Jamil, the ethics of the player. What do you mean, Jamil? I'm trying to gain an understand. Jamil, you're smarter than I am, buddy. So you got to be able to clarify some of this stuff for me. Minimize the showboat. Oh, absolutely. You know what happens? This is a very good point, Jamil. Showboating on the field, all you're asking for is problems because there's somebody else that's watching you do it, and there's always a payback for it. So, so that's the key. That's the key thing. You know, raising your kids and having respect for their adversaries, respect for their teammates. And when you go off and you showboat, you're taking away from the team effort. And you want to be the opposite of that. You want to have a team attitude first, always. And when you do something well, the team wins. And when the team wins, you've done something well. And you know, I go back to many of the guys, and so there's been many successful guys that came through the Michigan program that were walk-ons. And in many ways, it's the walk-ons that prepared the starters for that particular game. And those players took great pride in showing up and giving the best look that they could for those players during a week of practice. And in many ways, that was the key to success of any program. And so if there's one guy that separates himself and thinks that a team's successful because of him, you've lost that dynamic. You've lost that attitude that's focused on the team. And having that humility is critically important, being humble. And you want to celebrate the best way that you know how by celebrating with your teammates, is understanding that no great goal is ever achieved alone, even for the individual sports. Even if you're a great wrestler, inevitably there's going to be a great parent, a great coach, somebody that showed you the way. That's going to be the key. I mean, I think if you even talk to some of the great golfers in the PGA, they will always attribute a lot of their success for the people that formed them, whether it was a parent or a coach or something like that. And obviously we're focusing on parents here. I think that's really, really important. Okay. All right. Awesome. 30 minutes on the dot. Goodness gracious, Christy, this has been great. Very well done. So anyway, go ahead. Okay. Thank you, everybody.